Hello and welcome to this brief discussion on surviving nursing school. I want to start off with a quick change in wording here, however. While many new nursing students are looking for the answers for surviving nursing school, let's take a second to think about what that wording implies. It implies that the goal of nursing school, the mark of success, is survival, also implying that there's a chance you won't survive. This title also implies that there is one clear set of instructions that works for everyone. So as you can probably sense, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So let's start off with a title change here. So now we're looking at this as some pointers for thriving in nursing school. These are some tips, and they can and may help you, but keep in mind that nursing school isn't just for surviving. Each of your classes is a step toward your nursing career that will shape the kind of nurse you will be. So this video introduces some bits of advice that have helped other students in the past that you can take or leave when you think about your learning style, your personality, your living situation, and so on. So in this presentation, we're going to touch on 4 broad categories of things that can matter when you are in nursing school, and this includes time management, study skills, organization and planning, and interpersonal relationship building. So starting with time management, it's really important to make every minute count while you are in nursing school. And that does not mean you should be working every minute that you are a nursing student. It means that if you're resting, you really need to rest. If you're taking a nap, commit to that nap. If you're studying, commit to studying. This also implies in terms of where you are doing your studying and what kind of studying you're doing and who you're studying with. So starting off with where you study, think about the locations that are conducive to studying. So a lot of times we tell students don't study in bed. This should be associated with rest, not with focusing. Some students it helps to relocate to the library, to even rent a study room in the library, to go to a coffee shop where maybe there's just enough distraction but just enough quietness so you can focus. So think about you and the way your brain works and where you notice that you've studied best. And maybe it's not where you're currently studying because maybe it's a little inconvenient, but sometimes changing that setting can really switch you into this mode of it's time to study. Also think about who you're studying with and what really works for you. Some students do not want to work in study groups and don't thrive in that environment, whereas other students really need that interpersonal support. So think about who you're studying with, if you are studying with anybody, and what works for you. You want to think about the students who are going to help you focus, not maybe provide some comic relief or some social support. Definitely need comic relief, definitely need social support, but if you need to study, you need to study. So think about the people that really help you reach that goal. And then when you study. So if you're finding that the time you've been studying is at the end of the day, but you just can't focus and you're kind of running out of steam and you're getting very tired, then maybe it's time to select a new time to study. So thinking about when your brain is in that best gear, when you have the right amount of time and access to a good space to study, think about that and really plan that into your week. And then I have here, are you spinning your wheels, or are you kind of maybe looking like you're studying but not really making a lot of progress? So if you find that maybe you're getting overwhelmed, maybe you're reading something 3 or 4 times and you're realizing you're not paying attention to what you're reading, maybe you're jumping from topic to topic, this could be a sign that you're really not making progress. And even though you may objectively look like you're studying, you are not actually learning extra information, you are not applying your knowledge. That might be a sign that it's time to take a break. And this goes back to make every minute count. If you're realizing that what you're doing is not being productive, don't force it. Maybe it's time to go for a walk. Maybe it's time to take a nap. Maybe it's time to just take 5 minutes to talk to a friend. Something to give you a break or to help you reset so that when you jump back into studying, you really are actually studying. And then again, this goes back into what we call diminishing returns, or when you may be studying, but it's 3:30 in the morning, you keep falling asleep. Technically, you're looking at your notes. Technically, you are reading material, but it may be a better benefit to you that you're sleeping and resting instead of forcing yourself to study when maybe it's not a good time. So looking at some more strategies for time management, it can be helpful to really map out your days and consider which days exams may be or papers may be due, and then work backwards and say, okay, if my paper is due on the 17th, I really would like to have my first draft full draft done maybe by the 10th so that I can take a couple days off and jump back into it and complete my final draft by the time it's due. Maybe if you're a writer that needs a lot more time, I want my first draft ready by the 3rd or something like that. So really mapping things out and being realistic with yourself in terms of, if my exam is on this day, I know this one has a lot of content that I really struggle with, so I am going to map out these specific days I'm going to study these specific topics, and I'm going to set aside this number of hours so that I can be realistic and plan my schedule accordingly. Also, be cognizant of where you're spending your time when you're studying. So, for example, if I'm taking a health and illness course and I just loved the lecture I had on arterial blood gases and I thought it was so interesting. So when I go to study for that class, that's what I always tend to gravitate to. I study a little bit extra on that because it makes me feel good. I feel really confident and I enjoy it. But I really didn't like the lecture on intracranial pressure monitoring. That just didn't stick with me and I don't really gravitate to it. Well, more often than not, we'll hear students say, yeah, I spent tons of time on arterial blood gases because I found it so interesting. I didn't really do that much on intracranial pressure monitoring. And guess where? I tended to lose more points. So be aware of how much time you're spending on a specific topic and be really honest with yourself and say, do I think I've probably got this topic? I think I really understand this. And am I avoiding a certain topic that I know is just harder for me? And really budget your time so that you're spending an adequate amount of time on all topics. So now looking at time management, there's a concept that I think all of us struggle with, which is trying to stay focused. We live in a world full of distractions, from our phones to people walking by to just intrusive thoughts, thinking about all the things going on in our lives. It can be very challenging to try to stay focused. So step 1 is to really identify some negative distractions and do your best to reduce or eliminate those. So for example, many of us struggle with being pulled into our phone and we get a message or we get a phone call or we check an app or we get a notification and before we know it, 20 minutes have gone by and I'm not studying anymore. Or I have family or friends that are really concerned about me and want to talk with me, and this is so much nicer than doing my homework right now, so I'm going to talk to my family or to my friends instead of studying. Now, like I've said before, that social support is critical. It's very important, and having those supportive conversations is really important to your success. But if you have allotted an hour to study for an exam, make sure you're studying for that exam. And maybe that conversation with a family member or with a friend needs to happen at a time where you don't really need to have that level of focus and peace and quiet so you can study. So there are apps and there are strategies that you can look at to minimize phone distractions. There's a number of apps now. You can simply just put it in another room. You can even just set a timer so that every time you pick up your phone, you see the timer is ticking and you remember that you need to put it down. There's a lot of different ways that we can be a little more cognizant of how much our phone interrupts us. And then really just telling family and friends and saying, I would really love to talk with you about that, or I'm really sorry to hear what you're going through. I want to be able to focus when I'm talking to you, and right now I'm studying and I don't think I'm going to be a good listener. So can we try to talk in a little bit later or tomorrow or something? So another thing that can help is to move while you're studying. Some of us need to move a little more than others while we're studying, but know what you need. Sometimes just sitting in one place is not good for blood flow and therefore not good for blood flow to our brains and oxygen to our brains, and it can be harder to focus. So if you're not actively typing, or maybe if you're listening to a recording or you're watching a video, it can help to stand up or even pace in place or stretch a little bit. And obviously don't do this while you're driving, but you want to be staying safe while you are moving and studying when it's appropriate for you. Other times, it's not helpful to move while you're studying, and you really need to maybe just sit down and focus on the content. But when you can, take those little breaks to maybe just go up and down the stairs one time and then get back to work. And then it can be helpful to set timers for each topic. So maybe I'm taking 3 courses and I have exams in 2 of them next week, and I have a paper due in the other one the following week, and I'm starting to get really overwhelmed and I really don't like writing and I don't feel confident about one of these exams. It can be really difficult to manage that time. So what can help is to look at your calendar and pick out the slots of time that you have and say, for this 2-hour chunk, I'm going to study this topic. For this 1-hour chunk, I'm going to study that topic. For this 3-hour chunk on this day, I'm going to work on my paper, and so on. So depending on your schedule, you may not have 3-hour chunks, you may not have 1-hour chunks, but you know how your brain works and how your studying habits evolve and what supports you and what doesn't. So it can be helpful to set a timer and say, okay, I told myself I only have 1 hour to study this topic. I'm going to set a timer for an hour. I am not going to pick up my phone for that hour. I'm really going to focus, and then I have to move on to the next topic to be able to stay on track. So thinking about how much time you're spending in certain topics and being really cognizant of that can help you manage your time.